All right, guys. I guess we're gonna do this. I'm gonna share this link real quick. If anyone wants to join me, I guess I don't know what I'm gonna do. So I'm just gonna go ahead and share this real quick. This is gonna be a real awkward beginning. I apologize. All right. So no one's here yet. I don't think anyone's here yet. Is anyone here? Probably not. I'm here. So I'm just gonna. I guess I'll start talking. I guess this is real weird. So this is what we're going to do, or this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to take a little bit of time and talk about my journey into the all 22 film, the coach's film, and kind of how I got into it, some of the struggles, kind of my current process and all that stuff. And the reason I'm doing this is with you guys have heard there's things going on in the world. Game Pass, NFL Game Pass is free right now, which is absolutely amazing. And that's where the coach's film comes from. So I mean, there's more things you can do with it. You can go back as far as like '09. You can rewatch any Super Bowl. You've got condensed games on there. You've got full games, anything you want. But they've got the coach's film back, I believe, as far as 2011, as far as it goes back. I know this because I've been wanting to do a recap at some point on the Packers 2010 Super Bowl run, and they don't have the coaches film for it, which kind of sucks. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk about this a little bit. Again, how I got into it, and maybe give a little tips or something if anyone wants to join me. And if they don't, I think this thing is archived. I don't know. This is my first time doing this. I don't know how to share my screen either. So maybe this will be a real short thing. Probably real short. God, I've never felt so old in my entire life. I feel real old. I'm trying to share my screen. I don't know how to share my screen. Uh, oh man. Okay. Uh, do. Hey, people, join me. I don't know how to share my screen. I was gonna do that to try to break down a play or at least show you what I'm looking at, and I don't know how to do that. So that's gonna be fun. So like I said, kind of when I started, where no one was actually listening to me because I was talking to myself. I kind of want to do this just kind of talk through kind of my process, kind of how I got started doing this. Game Pass is now offering free stuff. You're able to access them for free through the quarantine. I think for the next 30 days or something, which is amazing. And there's so much great stuff you can do there. And so I kind of want to talk about why I got into it, how I got into it, and stuff like that. And maybe that'll help. Maybe that'll help if you're looking to do something. So um, my journey kind of began. My journey, God, that sounds dumb. It started back in say 2013. It was when the coach's film came out. I'd always been curious about football, always been a big football guy, and so I wanted to learn a little more once the coach's film. I never had any intention of writing about any of this. It was just I wanted to know what was happening off the screen. What was going on in the stuff I couldn't see. I was very interested at the time, still am, I guess, in routes, not necessarily route concepts because I didn't really know what those were because I was dumb, but more some safety play as well. Cornerbacks. I wanted to see basically if there's a blown play, why was it blown, what was behind that and everything. So not really knowing anything, I dove in at the time. I had an iPad second generation iPad, I think, and I would just go through and rewatch. It was Packers games, Packers guys. So I would just go through all these Packers games and just say, okay, what happened on this play, and just rewatch each play from each game over and over and over again. Again, I think this was the 2013 season. So this is when Rodgers, broke his collarbone and came back in Week 17. But for a long period of time, he was not playing. He missed 8 games that year, which was bad because that wasn't great. But it was also kind of good because it gave me different ways to look at the game, different ways to kind of think about it. And I remember one of the things I worked on that year was safety depth when Rodgers was in versus when Rodgers was out. I assume they kind of come up, the safeties would come up in that thing, but I didn't know for sure. And so that was one thing I looked at that I wouldn't be able to look at otherwise, which was kind of awesome. So that's just an example, I guess. But that's when I started, and I had no idea what I was looking at. I just kind of wanted to see. So I'd take my iPad and I'd go through each play, and there's a rewind feature. And the all 22, what's cool about it is you get the what's called the all 22 angle. So you get the kind of side angle of everyone on the field, unless it's Soldier Field, because there's this garbage. It's held by like a drunk person in the stands or something. But you get like the full, so you get everyone on the field. You get the full wide view, and you can really see how everything develops, how everything breaks down. And then you get the secondary view as well, which is is just behind one of the lines. There's a camera basically behind an end zone pointing it, and that's really good for line play. Looking at line play. So what I would do is I would look at every single play. I would just watch on repeat. I'd rewind it, and then I would take screenshots on my iPad and then just go through those. I'm looking at every single one. I was looking at, okay, how did this work? This guy moved. Why did this guy move? Why would this guy move? At the time, again, I knew nothing about any of this stuff, and so it was just I still am kind of like that a little bit, where I've read quite a bit since then. I still continue to read and continue to learn. By the time I didn't really know a whole lot about schemes, concepts, any of that. It was just kind of, why did this guy move? Why did the safety come down and do this? And then why did the offense do this? Why did this guy moving here force this other guy to move over here? It was a real weird. It was a weird experience, kind of getting into that again, not knowing anything about it. It was just this. I don't know how any of this stuff works, and so that was kind of fun. So that was my first go at it. Was really just taking screenshots, looking at still images over and over again, almost like, I guess, how they do, on the sideline of a game, except I was doing it myself, and it was super, super time consuming. So then I started circling stuff. Again, no intention of writing. And at some point I decided just, okay, if I'm interested in this, someone else is as well. The landscape back in 2013 in terms of people doing film stuff was not what it is today. There just wasn't that content out there. And so if I wanted to know kind of more about this film stuff, about what happened, why was this going on, I just kind of assumed other people were as well, and I couldn't find that, so I just had to start writing it, and probably not very good. I think I'm lucky. I started on a blog with a good friend of mine, and then I jumped over to it was Packer Update. It's Packers Notes now. Packer Update went belly up without any warning, and so all of that stuff is gone, for better or worse. All of my early stuff, all the screenshot stuff, all that stuff is gone. Which, I don't know, probably fine, I guess. That's probably okay. I don't want to relive that stuff. It's probably terrible. So, and then I jumped over to Titletown Sound Off, Back to the Future, and now with Cheesehead TV and Packer Report. So through it all, I'm kind of learning. I'm kind of each game, each play, I'm trying to get a little better. You recognize things you didn't recognize before. I just never really knew what to call it. And so, I had a lot of people. I've learned a lot from reading, but I've also learned a lot just from following people or interacting with people. Ben Fennell is a guy. He's over at The Athletic now. He's been doing film stuff longer than I know, I guess. But I've learned a ton about just terminology and stuff from them. And my thing has always been, I don't like to get just buried in terminology. I want to know what's going on. I want to try to understand what's going on. But I also want to be able to convey that and let other people know what's going on without getting bogged down in the terminology. Because I know, me personally, I find that if someone gets too heavy into the terminology of it, I lose interest real quick. If I don't understand what someone is talking about, if they start talking about, this is flip Y 9 to zebra or whatever the devil it's going to be, spider 2 Y banana, I guess, is a big one. If they're going to start talking about those specifics, I don't understand that, I'm not going to learn anything. And so I've always kind of take more of a simplistic approach to that, partly because I'm a simplistic man, I guess. And part of that just because, that's how I learn, and I assume that's how other people can learn as well. So that's kind of a little bit about me, kind of why I started, kind of how I got how I got to where I am. It's a hobby. It's an expensive, time consuming hobby that I've been doing for a while, and I enjoy it, but it is still just basically a hobby. This is the point where I was gonna like jump into a play, but I don't know how to share my screen. And so I'm going to look around. I'm going to poke around very oddly and try to figure out how to share my screen. And if any of the one or two people that may be half watching this know how to share a screen on this sucker, man, that'd be dope. I would love that. I guess maybe you can chat. Maybe you can chat. I don't know. This is not going well for me. So I am going to poke around and try to find that. But my goal was just to kind of show, my process, and I guess I can talk about that since I can't figure out how to do this. So what I do now, I've whittled it down, and the reason I've whittled it down, there's multiple reasons. I just do passing concepts now during the season, and that makes it really easy for me. And there's a couple of reasons I've done that. One is that, again, like I talked about at the beginning, the landscape of the Packers writing has just gone, it's just blown up. Everyone's doing it. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of people are doing it. And I felt like at a certain point, this was a couple of years ago, that I was not adding anything. I kind of thought about giving it up for a little bit, just because if I was just going to do the same thing as everyone else was doing, there's really no point. I was just another voice screaming in the wilderness. But I decided, I was talking to a friend of mine and decided if I pivoted, if I just focused on this one thing that maybe interested me, that maybe no one else was doing, that was my lane. I just needed to find a lane. And so that was part of it. Was I was kind of getting burnt out a little bit, but also there was so many people doing it that I just felt like I was one among a million people doing the exact same thing, just general film stuff. Hey, look at this play. This was kind of cool. It's broken up, and there's a ton of value in that, and that's amazing, and I love doing that. But I pivoted over to the passing concepts. Just basically, there's a couple different reasons. It was so I felt like I was doing something different, but also because that's something that's always interested me. And I didn't do that to begin with, just simply because there was no one else doing the general stuff, and I was interested in everything. Well, now people are doing other stuff. And so I was able to kind of just dig into the passing game. And so from there, I didn't know anything about concepts. So from there, I started, digging into concepts a little bit more. What's this called? What's the point of this? Where did this come from? Kind of both the history and the ideas behind it. That kind of would allow me to understand that a little better. And so that's kind of how I got to where I am now. And then the third reason I did that is just basically because I didn't have a lot of time. I had my first kid a few years back. Time gets a little shorter with a child. You don't have as much free time. And it was just taking entirely too much time to look at a whole game. And I would take notes during a game. And so I'll talk about that in a minute. I'll take notes during a game, but I'd find myself with be interested in too much, man. I'd have like 35 plays that they wanted to look at. Well, then I'm making screenshots, or at that point I'm making GIFs for 35 plays and breaking down and looking at each one of those, maybe a dozen, maybe 2 dozen times, try to figure out what's going on and then explain that when writing. That's just entirely too much time, and I had no free time. And so being able to do a laser focus on this one aspect of the game that was one I was interested in and no one else was doing, that's what I do. So basically after every game, now, like the day after, usually the film drops the day after, I just look at, I look to see all the passing plays the Packers had, complete passes, incomplete passes, interceptions, sacks, quarterback scrambles is what I look at, because I feel like that gives me the full picture of, quarterback scramble. It doesn't go down as a passing attempt, but unless it was a planned thing, a QB draw, which you don't see a whole lot of in Green Bay, that you still get that, that was a passing concept that broke down. And so it gives me the full picture of what they wanted to run. And again, kind of shortens what I need to look at. But back in the day when I got started, so kind of good to revert back to that. If you are looking to get into this or looking to do some of this, it's too much to look at every single play, or it was too much for me. Maybe you have more time. I have no earthly idea. I don't know you. But maybe I do. I don't know who's watching this. I would take a notebook with me wherever I went, whether that's, I always watch games, usually watch games with friends and family. And so whether that's watching at a bar, watching at my house, watching at someone else's house, I'd always take a notebook. And I'd, kind of scribble rough timestamps of something I was kind of interested in. I'd put a question in there or something. I'd have, broken up by quarters. And then I would say, roughly the 7:30 timestamp of Q1 was this play. And I'd usually my thing was, and this took me years to figure out because I'm not a smart person, roughly like it was third down, roughly the 7:30 mark, because when you're looking, all these things are time stamped when you're looking at plays. So then you can say, okay, 7:30 of Q1, third down and 5. This run happened. How did he get that lane? Something like that. Just some question that allowed me to then. So then when I'm going in afterwards and trying to look for plays to break down, if I'm actually looking at that, I can laser focus on that. I jump around to the ones I find interesting. Now maybe that's 30 plays, and maybe it's 15. It depends on the game. That's less than 80 or whatever, or 100, or the full length of a game. And so you're able to kind of and maybe you're probably not catching the full picture. I think it was very helpful for me when I started to look at the whole game on the all 22 and really try to figure what was going on, because you do get, there's so many things going on in any given play that a play that didn't really look interesting when you're watching it on TV does look interesting when you're looking at all 22. There's always something going on. And so you do miss something if you do that kind of condensed version. But if you are just kind of looking to break in and you're looking, the question that I would ask would be, what am I looking at this for? When I go to, okay, I'm going to watch this game on all 22 because that's overwhelming. You're seeing these two angles and they're huge, and you're conditioned to kind of see the ball. You're looking for the ball when you're watching the game. You're watching the quarterback. You're watching where the ball is going because that's where the camera is trained. Well, now you've got this wide picture of it, and if you just jump into it saying, I'm going to watch this game on this, and you don't know what you're looking at, it's ridiculously overwhelming. So if you have some kind of system in place, if you've got, just as a start, I want, there's this one game from, even like if you're looking to start now, it's the off season. A lot of people are stuck inside. There's a game from 2014, say one of my favorites is the maybe 2014, 2016 Cowboys game. Des caught it. That was 2016, I believe. What did Aaron Rodgers do in the fourth quarter? I've looked at that. But if you're curious about that, that's your starting point. What were all of Aaron Rodgers' attempts in the fourth quarter of that game? That gives you a starting point, and you get details on each play. So this is complete short right, this is complete short left, something like that. And so you can kind of you've got more of a focus. You've got an intent when you're going in there. You're not just watching to watch. You're going in there with a purpose in mind to do something, especially when you're getting started and maybe you don't fully understand what you're looking at. That can be absolutely huge because you're going in with with preconceived knowledge of a game that you know about, and maybe even a play that you know about, but you're running it back a dozen times, seeing it through a different lens. That's super, super helpful. And the other thing that I found is really, really helpful with that, and there was a play I was going to show tonight that kind of highlight that, is this. It's when you're evaluating players, when you're looking at players, even when you're evaluating plays, you're looking at the you're looking at the process. You're not looking at the endpoint. That's something I've said 1,000 times. And you can look at, when you get the wide view of that, you get the full all 22 view of that. That's amazingly helpful, because what looks like I gotta figure out how to share my screen, man. What looks like a bad play or a busted play or something like that is really just it could be a miscommunication. Now, not being in the huddle, not being in the locker room, you can't always know if that was the quarterback, if that was the wide receiver, if that was a running back or whatever, but you can make some educated guesses. You can at least say, oh, well, like, I think based on this, that maybe the wide receiver is supposed to sit in that zone, or he was supposed to run through and the quarterback read that wrong. Or maybe you just don't even know. I say that a lot. I can see, instead of like, oh, well, I know I went through this a lot. I think that week 17 game last year, that the Packers-Lions game, that was, Rodgers was bad. Rodgers wasn't good, but he some of those missed throws were throws that were clearly miscommunications, where Rodgers was reading the safety and, he threw one way and the wide receiver went another way. It's something you don't really see. It's just, it's another depth of the way that you can view the game, instead of just, oh, that was a bad throw. Well, it wasn't always necessarily a bad throw. So digging into that side of it is really, really interesting. I don't know if there's anyone on here, or if anyone can chat or me or anything like that, I guess. So if anyone's got questions now, I guess you're free to ask me questions. I guess you can type it in the thing. I believe that is open. I'm still trying to figure out, I wanted to walk through a play here and just how to use Game Pass in general. but I still just don't know how to share my screen. So if anyone has any questions, that's great. And if not, maybe I'll try this again another day when I can figure out how to share my screen. So does anyone have any questions? Anyone out there? Anyone listening? Are there horse socks? All right. Well, I guess I'll end this. I may try to figure out how to do this, share my screen later, and use that as kind of an added piece to this. So, for anyone that happened to be on this, I hope this was informative, or at least not super boring. I kind of feel like it was super boring, but hey, it's my first try, so maybe I'll do this again, and also maybe I will not. So, thanks for joining me, and I guess keep an eye out in case I can figure out how to share my screen, and then I'll set up a play, and we'll kind of walk through that a little bit. So, hey, thanks, guys.